This was supposed to be a routine VFR flight from Pittsfield, Massachusetts to Augusta, Maine. But marginal cloud bases turned to rain showers, low visibility, and reducing ceilings, and with about 70 miles to go, things are getting ugly. We're down to about 1,000 AGL here, much too low, skimming the bases and just trying to keep ground contact. This is bad. Turning around is not likely to help, even with Laconia about 10 miles behind. We'd still be low, we'd be maneuvering, and even for an IFR pilot, a surprise IMC encounter can be fatal. Engaging the autopilot would be a great first step here, but we don't have one. So, as a VFR-only pilot, or an IFR pilot who's just been surprised by an IMC encounter, this is the way you should initially think about the instrument scan in a way that's simplified and deliberate, and later, how you should enlist help from ATC. The first step in any instrument scan is setting pitch, power, and configuration in a way that's meant to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So let's do that now. The only thing I need to do here is set full power for the climb and pitch up to an appropriate attitude. I know that a cruise climb is about a 6-degree nose-up attitude, and a VY climb is about 10, so anything in between those two is just fine. And I had already slowed down to about 120 knots as the weather started to deteriorate, which was a good idea. So I know the plane's going to seek out about that. All that I'm doing here now, keeping the scan as simple as possible, I'm just looking at the attitude indicator. The attitude is life here. We have to make the picture on the attitude indicator into a miniature version of the outside world. I'm not too concerned about direction right now. I'm just keeping the wings level. Now let's confirm that that's working. So I'm going to make a glance over to the airspeed on the left side of the PFD here. And that's right in the ballpark. A bit slower than my normal cruise climb. That's completely fine. Immediately then back to the attitude in order to make sure that we're maintaining that pitch attitude and maintaining wings level. That's easy on a PFD like this where you can see the attitude pretty much everywhere you look, but you have to be a little bit more purposeful when you're on a steam gauge 6-pack where the instruments are a little bit farther from each other. Now, if I had looked over there and I had seen a significantly slower speed, probably it would have been a configuration issue. Maybe I had flaps or gear out, so I would check that. I could make small corrections in pitch in response to that if my speed was a little bit off, but in this situation, I don't care so much if my speed is a little bit off. This is an emergency maneuver right now. So job 1 is underway and the climb is under control, but we can't climb forever. There are 2 potential ways this climb ends. First, if we get comfortably on top of the clouds, then we can level off and switch to visual flying and work on the problem of getting back safely on the ground. Odds are in this VFR situation you wouldn't know where the cloud tops are, but the chances are they're fairly high. To have enough moisture for rain like we ran into here, clouds generally need to be at least 4,000 feet thick. If we're not getting on top, we can level off at a safe altitude, get established in straight and level flight, and then figure out what's next. In this area, the maximum elevation figure is 4,600, but that's for terrain that's not close to our actual position. Still, I'm not navigating precisely at the moment, just holding a heading, so let's wait until at least 5,500 to level off. We haven't called ATC yet, and we will, but only once we're completely under control. In the meantime, they'll likely see us and route any IFR traffic out of our way. So to level off, it's the same process. Set pitch, power, and configuration appropriate for the level off. So I'm going to push the nose down to the horizon. Again, all I'm really concerned about as a VFR-only pilot in this situation is maintaining aircraft control. And if I set the appropriate attitude and power and configuration, that's going to take care of itself. Now let's set power here, because I don't want to run around at full throttle. My first step is I'm going to bring the throttle back just by feel until I'm approximately where I want. Now a quick glance over to the manifold pressure, and it's at 19 inches, which is fine. That's a low cruise setting. That serves me well here. I don't need to go fast. And less acceleration being involved means less time where I'm having to retrim. All I'm doing here is focusing on level pitch, level bank, with an appropriate power setting. And I can glance over to the altitude and see that it's not moving. So this attitude is right where I want it. And again, just wings level, because all I care about right now is going straight ahead and maintaining control. Okay, now to help us maintain straight and level here, I'm going to set some bugs. On the PFD, I can select altitude and press and hold, and it'll sync it. It's 5,200. I don't really care for it to be a round number here. But now I can see at a glance when I scan the altitude where I am relative to the altitude that I bugged. I'm going to do the same thing with heading. Press and hold, center it.
We'll talk more in a minute about a scan method that achieves that sort of efficient precision, but the secret here is that in a pinch, all you really need to do is set attitude, power, and configuration appropriate for what you're trying to do, and the performance you'll get will be predictable.
But what do we do now? Well, now is the time to enlist the help of ATC. If you're already talking to an ATC facility, which we should have been, just tell them what's up. If you're not, you want to go to 121.5 most likely, and most GPSs have a shortcut to get there. On this one, you press and hold the comm volume button, and it goes to 121.5 and puts it into the active. On some Garmin GTN installations, if you press and hold, it also squawks 7,700, which can't hurt. Let's say we did want to squawk 7,700. The way to handle distractions like that is to do them one short bit at a time, and between every one of those short bits, return to the attitude and make sure it hasn't moved. So I can go over and press the transponder and then go back to the attitude. It's still where we want it. Now I can do this really one digit at a time, where I know the first two digits are the same, so I can go 7, 7, back to the attitude. Still looking good. Transponder, 0, 0, back to the attitude. Transponder, enter. And that's guaranteed to get people's attention. So we haven't exactly solved the problem here. We've kind of traded it for another. We're up at 5,200 feet now, solidly in IMC. We have control of the airplane, but we need to find somewhere to go, some way to get out of this. And I don't necessarily, as a VFR-only pilot, have the bandwidth to go checking weather and navigating all on my own. I need to enlist ATC's help here. But what can they do for us?
The obvious thing we could use help with here is weather. ATC might have pilot reports for cloud tops, or they could certainly solicit them. They have their own weather radar if avoiding rain showers or storms was an issue, and they can get local weather as well as pilot reports of cloud bases to help us find somewhere to divert to now. We could get vectors to a good airport or better weather or just lower terrain. And to keep the scan simple, they could even be no gyro vectors. This is where you're simply told when to start and stop turns. They're meant for gyro failure situations, but here this sort of vectoring could allow you to keep your scan centered on the attitude indicator. ATC has official minimum altitudes they could safely descend you to, which might be below the cloud bases. They also have an emergency vectoring map that could allow even lower safe altitudes than usual. Finally, they could even vector you for an instrument approach if necessary, and in some areas they're even equipped for radar guidance all the way down to the runway. Not many airports formally offer these sorts of surveillance approaches, but you can always ask, and as it happens, nearby Portsmouth can do it. In this case, the best action is probably to stay the course, since weather becomes decent VFR by the destination. But as long as we're here, let's practice some instrument flying with a bit more precision. My experience is that many IFR pilots could benefit from a more methodical approach to the scan. In fact, my scan improved greatly when I became an instrument instructor and had to find a way to teach it. I didn't realize there was room for improvement until I saw how much more mental bandwidth I had when I became more structured and methodical myself.
So this is not a comprehensive instrument scan course, but here are a collection of tips and techniques that any good instrument scan should include. We're back at 3,000 now on a 090 heading, and let's say we want to make a VY climb straight ahead to 5,000 feet, and we want to do it with a little bit more precision than we just did in the VFR only pilot scenario. First thing I'm going to do is set my bugs. I've got the heading of 090 bugged. I'm going to set the altitude of 5,000.
And then step 1 of the scan is to set attitude, power, and configuration as appropriate for this straight-ahead VY climb. So that's full power, mixture, prop, and throttle all the way in, and I'm going to pitch for right on around 10 degrees. And then we trim for that. There's a deceleration involved here, so I'm going to need some aft trim as we slow down. And I'm just looking at the attitude indicator here while I trim to hold this attitude. Now, step 2 is a radial scan of primary instruments. This is where we confirm that the attitude and configuration and power that we've picked is achieving the performance that we want. So first I go to my primary pitch instrument here, the one that's telling me whether the pitch attitude that I've chosen is correct. That's the airspeed. And sure enough, we're right on VY. Back to the attitude to hold this, and then down to heading. And we're right on target there too. Could maybe go a few degrees left, so when I go back to the attitude, I put in just a very slight bank to the left. Then I would continue that scan, airspeed, attitude, heading, attitude, only making adjustments at the attitude step and evaluating those adjustments at the heading step.
A common error when leveling off from a climb or descent is to stare at the altitude and push or pull to stop it on the number. But remember, any attitude changes need to be made with reference to the attitude indicator, including that level off. So that means we need to know when to start making the pitch change. And a good rule of thumb is to lead the level off by 10% of the vertical speed. We're close to 1,000 feet per minute here, so 100 feet below our target altitude will work. Alright, there's 100 feet below, so now we'll slowly ease the pitch down to the horizon and begin to trim to keep it there.
Now let's set power to a cruise setting. We'll say 23 inches and 2300 RPM. I'm doing this first by feel and by sound so that I can keep my attention on the attitude indicator. Now I glance over and we might tweak the RPM back just a little bit. Now straight back to the attitude. Once things have settled in, you don't necessarily have to maintain an aggressive back and forth type of radial scan. Then you're at a stage that calls for more of a monitor scan, where you take in the bigger picture and you look for changing trends. And that's pretty easy on a PFD like this because you can see everything at once, and everything's laid out in a logical pattern. So pitch information is arranged horizontally across the PFD. I've got airspeed on the left, my actual pitch attitude, then altitude, and then the vertical speed indicator tucked away on the right there. And bank-related information is presented vertically. I have bank angle at the top, the airplane also representing bank angle below that. I have turn coordination and turn rate, and then heading and course deviation down on the HSI. So once we settle into cruise here, the simple scan is going across horizontally and looking for trends and pointer positions relative to their bugs, and then going vertically and looking for the same. All right, let's take something arbitrary here. Let's say we want to make a 500 foot per minute descent at our current airspeed to an altitude of, let's say, 3,500, while making a left turn to, let's say, a 120 heading. So I'm going to bug the 120 heading, bug the 3,500.
So what attitude is appropriate here for what we're trying to achieve? Well, in instrument flying, we generally make standard rate turns using the turn coordinator, and that's 3 degrees per second, and the bank angle depends on true airspeed. A good rule of thumb is that you take your airspeed divided by 10 and then add 5. So here that's about 16 plus 5, or 21 degrees. And in fact, the G5s have already done the work for us and put green triangles the right bank for a standard rate turn, which is nice. But by the way, if you're in an accidental IMC encounter, don't worry about standard rate. In fact, keep your turns really shallow, not more than about 10 degrees. For pitch and power, I know that in this plane, decreasing power by 1 inch of manifold pressure per 100 feet per minute does the trick.
All right, so power adjustment, again doing it by feel.
Then I glance over and I got it pretty close. I'll tweak it, rolling into the bank angle that I want, and really just letting the pitch come down by about 3 degrees. I also know that relationship, that about 3 degrees gets me 500 feet per minute, and we're pretty much right on target. Now the heading's coming up, so I'm going to focus on the rollout there. When I'm about 10 degrees prior to the target heading, so right about here, my attention goes back to the attitude, and I smoothly roll the wings back to level. And we got that pretty close. And now I just continue my scan for a straight ahead descent. So 500 foot per minute descent, we'll start the level off about 50 feet before reaching my target altitude of 3,500. And knowing that allows me to focus on attitude as I make the attitude change. As soon as I get within 50 feet, I just focus on the attitude and smoothly bring it to the horizon and set power as appropriate. And a smooth transition should take about 50 feet. There's 3,600. There's 3,550, so I'm going to smoothly pitch up. While adding power. Add that 5 inches back in. And we're pretty close there. I leveled off a little bit too quickly, so I'm about 20 feet high. So I can let the nose down by about 1 degree. Fix that, and then bring it back up. You can see how subtle these adjustments really are, and it's necessary to do it that way. So keep those principles in mind. Get methodical and purposeful with your scan. You'll fly better, and you'll have more mental bandwidth to use on other tasks.